Okay.
Is it actually recording?
Not yet. The recording has started. Yes,
Okay.
perfect.
All right.
Okay. Is this, can everybody see my screen? What I will do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to
You know
disconnect
what? You
from the
disconnect
AV in
this,
the
yeah,
room.
exactly. Yeah.
Aren't you can join the AV in the room, and then we can see all of our guests on the big screen, and I will just present from my laptop.
Yes.
Perfect. The joys of technology. Okay, can everybody see my presentation?
I think we can.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So, hello, this is me. I'm Kaina. I'm an anesthesia associate at UCLH. And also,
We still have the start page.
is it not
No,
fed
we
forward
still
yet?
see the start page. So.
Technology.
Introduce yourself for that as well.
Yes, we can, but we do need the slides to work though. Anyway, I'm one of the perfect, it's just a lag. I'm one of the leads of the program at UCL and an educational supervisor for one of our students. I'm a science graduate before becoming an AA.
And that's me. I'm Arndt. I'm consultant anesthetist at UCLH, and together with this team of 4 people, one of the leads of the course, and also an education supervisor for the AAs we currently employ at UCLH.
Hi everyone, my name's Dan. I'm also a consultant at UCLH. I'm one of the co-leads for the course at UCL. I'm an educational supervisor, and I'm just about to become the AA training program director for London.
Before we continue, can I ask in the room, do you understand Dan? Because he's sitting the most farthest from the microphone. Can you hear him well? Yeah, okay. People are, okay, thanks.
Perfect.
So, I'm Frances Marfleet. I'm an anaesthesia associate at UCLH, and I'm the London Anaesthesia Associate Ambassador with HEE, and also one of the program leads on the master's program that we're running at UCL.
Cool. We wanted to just quickly get into contact with you before we bombard you with informations. I don't know if you have used Mentimeter before. You can click on that link and then it should open
Lovely.
up. People, you can use this QR code and scan it on your phone to get into the Mentimeter now, or otherwise, what you can do, you just go open another tab on your internet browser and type in www.menti.com, and then you will be asked to put in a code. The code will just appear in a second on the screen, I hope. I don't know if you have already used Mentimeter. Is it working on your laptop?
I'm just trying to present now. Arndt, would you like, this is, apologies everybody at home, this is the joys of technology. Would you like to take my seat, Arndt, and you could present Mentimeter from my laptop?
Yes.
Since this is... Couldn't make this stuff up.
No, I know.
I'm here all day prepared, and then our AV equipment has failed us, so we're...
Right. I don't have it here, so don't know exactly.
Is that not your Mentimeter?
No, that's a different.
Go to a browser, you can log in again.
What can people see? It's just they still.
Yeah. That says Mentimeter.
Okay. Can you screen share?
Yes, if you go.
Sorry, guys, this is really annoying because I'm always annoyed if people don't get the tech, the things right, isn't it? No, we are the ones. Can you just wait a second?
Yeah. Go back to the meeting.
Yes. Yeah, isn't it? Share. And then share. This one, yeah. Okay, cool. Here we are. So if you have never used Mentimeter, just go to www.menti.com and use that code, which you see on the right upper part. Can I quickly see if that's showing on yes. And then just answer the questions. So we would be interested if you have ever worked with Anesthesia Associates or not. And that's an interesting answer, isn't it? It's 50-50 currently. So we will give you a lot of room for discussion later, and then we would be interested to hear your opinions about, you know, if you have never worked with them, how is that, and how is your experience having worked with AAs? I tried something new today. I have prepared a little quiz which will come up now as the next slide. So thank you for this. It's interesting to see that more than half of you have already worked with AAs, but almost half of you haven't. So we hope that we can provide you with a lot of information. We will base it on this knowledge. So the quiz is now. So the question should come up. Can you try if it works?
On the screen.
Yeah.
Go on Mentimeter.
I'm just starting it now. So you have to be fast now. Answer your question. How many qualified AAs work in the UK? What do you think?
Give anybody time there to answer. Oh, there we go. No, we're okay.
Now you have time. You have half a minute time to answer. Is it 50? Is it 150? Is it 300? Or is it 500? Currently working in the UK. Qualified AA. Menti.com. And
If you manage to miss the QR code, you can also just log on using the info at the top of the screen, menti.com.
okay.
And there's a manual code you can enter.
So here we have the answers. So most of you actually think that it's 150, which is basically correct. Here is the leaderboard, and we have a few winners. Oh, we have lots of winners, isn't it? Thanks for that. I've never used that before. So the point is we don't know exactly how many AAs are currently working in the UK because they're not they're not officially registered yet, but we think it's about 120 to 150.
Actually, we think it's closer to 180.
Okay.
But because it's a managed voluntary register, there are maybe some AAs practicing that aren't on the system.
And while we talk, you can already put in a few words. So if you would just give us, in your opinion, what is the scope of practice for AA? Just put in something like GA or spinal or, I don't know, TOE or whatever comes into your mind. Just write it down, what you think is basically the scope of practice for AAs. And then it should come up as a word cloud here. We are going to talk, so Francis will talk about this later, so maybe you can then refer to this word cloud. So GA, spinal lines, ASA 1 to 2, general anesthesia, regional anesthetics, pre-op assessment, that comes sedation, IV access, theater turnovers, efficiency, I like that, workforce, broad scope, depends on working, and always regional GA spinal as the main thing, which I think reflects it well, isn't it, Francis?
Correct.
And
I
we will
agree.
talk about this later. Isn't it?
Cover this later.
Cool. That's it. Last question. A ranking. So we have 4 different ideas why maybe you are interested to train AAs in future, and maybe give us a ranking. What do you think is the most like, you know, what is your reason? What's your first reason why you want to train AAs? And what are the more or less likely reasons for yourself? And then let's see what comes up here. And that's it. And then we can go back to, do you want to come back to your laptop? So this is the last question. Okay, thank you for that. So we can see that the main aim is to, that's quite interesting, isn't it? So most of you believe it's the development of a continuous reliable workforce. And then reasons to tackle the anesthetic workforce crisis, be part of an innovative novel training, and the least likely option is just use the money. Thank you very much for engaging. Quite interesting to see where we are.
So,
I continue to chat a few minutes and then I hand over to Kaina. So student AAs at UCL. So we call them students, and that has been discussed nationally, actually, which is interesting. That was a long discussion. Are we going to call them trainees? Are we going to call them students? And the decision is to differentiate from anesthetic trainees, which are physicians, to more the physician associate professions. So we have agreed nationally that we are called students. And this is what we would also recommend you put on their name tags and things to just to make it clear. These are not trainees who can be left alone. No, these are students who need constant supervision throughout the whole 2 years. So we currently have 6 students at UCLH who started in 2021 and 2 who started a little bit later in 2022 in Northumbria. So these are the only students we're currently training. And now for the intake in March, we have 12 trusts who will work with us to train 39 students. We might have another few coming in, so we might get up to 45 students for this intake in March. And then
stragglers.
Yes, exactly. And we are planning another intake in September. And it's a nice mix actually of science grads and ODPs and nurses. And this is also in our first group. We try to really mix it up to get experience for ourselves from the different professional backgrounds. And we have very good experiences, all 4 groups actually. So they all do quite well in the moment. You can't really see the big difference anymore. So this is just showing you a little map where all these trusts are. So we are going to train. If you click on that, does it work? If you click on the link. So this is where all you guys are sitting. So you see it's quite nicely distributed throughout the UK. From Glasgow all the way down to London, basically. If the link doesn't work, it's fine. We can see where people are. And later in the discussion, I think we'll meet you.
Yes, of course, because I'm not sharing my screen. I'm sharing my.
That's
my
all right.
slide.
You can just leave it. I think it's fair enough to see. What's interesting is to see where are the trusts near your own trust, because we are going to talk about the tutorials later and see if we can pair you up with other trusts. So you can already see roughly where, if you're, if your neighbors nearby, then you can maybe just join them. We will chat about this in a few minutes.
Well, that did come up garbled. That's annoying.
Mm.
Sorry, this has come off cut off on my screen. Essentially, it was just letting you guys know the start date for the program is the 6th of March. We understand that most, if not all, NHS trusts tend to run a standardised induction day on the Mondays. So we've left Monday the 6th free for a hospital induction. You're welcome to arrange that for a different day if that suits you, but that'll just be free for the students. And we will do an induction at UCL virtually. It'll be on Teams on the Tuesday, the 7th of March. We'll invite all the students to that.
So now we're going a little bit more into details what you can expect from us and also what we are going to expect from yourself. So we as UCL, we provide the whole online learning platform, which is we use Moodle. I don't know if you have experience with Moodle. It's quite widely distributed in the UK, and all the online learning material is on Moodle, easily accessible for the students. The whole admin is for you to use. So if there's any administrative issues, you can directly communicate with UCL, or we can try to help you. So we are all clinical anesthetists, so AAs. But we have now started to work closely with our admin, so we might be able to help you with that as well.
Yeah.
Otherwise, UCL is there for you as well,
yeah,
as trust, so you can also directly communicate with them.
And UCL runs essentially the administrative side itself. So the recording of exam results and all of that sort of things, the student records, that's all done in-house at UCL.
We are running regular board of examiners with external examiners, internal examiners. we provide the assessments and the marking for all of you, so you don't need to bother with that. We try to take as much work off you as we can by providing the e-lectures and the assessments, markings. And also, if there's any problem with students, you can use the UCL disciplinary complaint process. We have, unfortunately, experience with that. We've done this already once, and it worked quite well. And I found it quite helpful that UCL was very supportive and could really help that student to get back on track. So it's quite a pleasant experience, even if wasn't pleasant in the beginning. It's a necessary process which UCL is offering. And we are going to talk about the tutorial plans later in a few minutes in this talk, as well about the sim training. This is how the students themselves can be supported by UCL. So they have full library access, including all the e-textbooks and journals, and this is quite extensive. There's a huge support and well-being program for all the students. So all our AA students have full access to the complete UCL support network, and that's huge. They can have a lot of benefits from it. There are a lot of students groups. We also try to connect the students on Moodle so they can discuss issues amongst themselves. Are we planning a WhatsApp group or something?
No, so keeping everything essentially in one central platform, Moodle has a discussion forum for the students to be involved with each other. We're trying to encourage the peer group of students for this year to work as a group. So they're not left individually to their own trusts where there may just be 2 or 3 of them. We want to connect the 39, 40 students together so they really do feel like a class. So they will be connected through Moodle and also through Teams. We'll also be using Teams for a lot of these. And there will be sort of classroom groups on Teams that the students can access. I don't know if you guys at home feel the same as me, but I try and keep WhatsApp away from work completely. there's enough groups, there's enough emails. We'll keep WhatsApp free.
So this is the next slide. This is basically what we can offer. So how are the students learning? The main learning, I believe, happens in your trust, in your theaters, workplace-based learning, which is by far the most important bit. So you are training your own AAs, or you are training the future AAs. We add our electronic platform and our e-learning, which then the students have to go through in their own time. This is that's why we put self-directed learning in capital letters, because it is really quite challenging for some of them that they actually have to do it themselves, and no one is really checking on that. But through the assessments and through the educational supervisor meetings, we can keep quite a good log on what they're doing. We will offer high fidelity simulation, which we think is best based at the trust levels. We're happy to support that. We're going to talk about this in a few minutes, as I said, as well about the tutor-led learning. That's basically it, isn't it? That's the way they learn. And I hand over to Kaina from here.
Yes. So yes, I'm going to give a little bit more detail on a few things. The structure of the course, as I'm sure you guys will all know, is a 24-month MSc. There's 8 modules, which is more the sort of taught element from the anaesthetic point of view. They will do them initially, and then they end with 2 30-credit modules, which culminates in writing a systematic review, which gives them their master's element. It won't affect the guys starting in March, probably not affect the guys starting in September. But in the future, we are hoping to flip this systematic review into a prescribing course. But that is, won't be able to come into play until after regulation. So that'll be a case of hold on to that. I'm going to look at a few bits and pieces now with you. This is where I'm going to have to share my screen rather than sharing my slides. So I'll just share screen. So I want to show you guys what the students will see. And of course, UCL are updating their Moodle page actually as of this year. They're making it more accessible. This format, which is called the grid format, will be changing. So it'll look slightly different, but the content will be the same. So we have the students each have access to this home page, which they land on, which gives them their all the rules, regulations, the handbooks, all the policies that they should be familiar with. We talked earlier about things like concerns of attendance and engagement and professional behaviour. Everything is here in black and white for the students to read, so they know what is expected of them. We have an announcements forum, so if we want to tell the students something exciting is happening, we can send it to them and it'll go straight to their email addresses. The chat forum we mentioned earlier, we like to have discussions for the students where we get them involved in chatting about sort of clinical topics. And this is where we try and engage the group of students, and the sort of the group that we have this year will all be sort of connected in the same chat forum. We have a whole bunch of resources that we link the students to. I'm sure as medical educators, everybody will be familiar with a lot of these things that we're directing the students to. By all means, if you know of any other sources out there, any other interesting resources for the students, let us know, and we'll always direct the students to them as well. There are so many wonderful things out there for teaching online that it's daft not to direct the students to. And then we have areas for the students to feed back to us, to report any problems that they have with the course. And I'm going to go into one of the specific modules next and show you more of the portfolio. So each individual module has its own page. Again, the format is changing. UCL is finally upgrading, so it'll look slightly different, but the content is basically the same. They have a little introduction, a little welcome. They have a curriculum map which tells them what they're expecting to learn about within this topic. We have the list of lectures, and I'll just show you through one of the e-lectures so you can see what the students can see. We've got a whole bunch for this module. I lost track of how many there are, 20, 25 or something lectures for this module. So one of them, let's have a look at 6.1.1. So they have a contents list, so they know what they're talking about in this each individual lecture. We can start the course. I'll not go through the whole thing, don't worry. But it's just this nice interactive format. It's a bit more engaging for the students to read through. You know, we have it's a really nice platform for these where we can make it a bit more than just pure text for the students. It's something that actually will hopefully keep everybody awake while they're doing their learning at home. And we can embed quizzes within these lectures as well. Little mini quizzes. Oh, thank God I got that one right. That'd have been embarrassing if I didn't. We have links to further readings, references, so the students can have a look. Additionally, beyond just the lectures, we do make it very clear to the students that the lectures aren't all they need to do. There is a lot of self-directed learning as well, so they use the lectures as a bit of a springboard to start off on. And this one was written by Oliver, who's actually one of our other ESs. He works with us at UCLH. Need to get his photo up so you can see what lovely Ollie looks like. So that is an example of one of the lectures. Yes. So
our experience with that is positive, but some of the students really struggle to know how much they actually have to learn. For example, about the brain and the central nervous system, because they can go into so much detail that they get lost and learn just a whole 9 weeks about the brain, but they have to learn about the thyroid function as well and other things in the same module. So one of the things you as the leads, the local leads and the educational supervisors, is to help them to to know how much content they should learn and how much not, if that makes sense. So it's finding the right balance to guide them a little bit in their self-directed learning. That would be helpful if you could engage in that way.
And we do give these intended learning outcomes for each lecture. So it gives them an idea as to sort of what areas they want to look at in detail when it comes to their understanding. Now, LabTutor is a wonderful resource through UCL, which our students will have access to as well. I just want to find.
Also, the faculty, everyone can use LabTutor.
Oh yes, absolutely. I want to find an example.
It's a lesson.
Here we go. So let's have a look at heart valves, shall we? My student view, it's hidden. Where have you gone?
So LabTutor is basically another interactive platform which is pre-populated with loads of topics, and you're free to use it. It's a UCL resource which you can just use. It's lessons. It's basically lessons, isn't it? On top of the online lessons which we have put on Moodle. So this is not our own material. This is basically UCL material, which you are free to use. And it's also made a bit interactive, so students can partly go through it themselves and partly with the tutor.
Yeah, I've got them. I had them in a, yeah.
I've certainly found it very helpful for some of the tutorials that I've done with the students, particularly things like anatomy and physiology. It covers a lot of really helpful material.
So we have, for example, a little pre-course induction. The students would have a look through, what do I know about ECGs? And then this is some pre-existing sort of lectures that you can work through with the students. So they have quite nice interactive. So the students can do these tests at home. You can work through them together as a group. Little quizzes here. You can drag and drop and test your knowledge. So there's a few different ones for modules, some of which are designed for the students to do pre-tutorials. Some of them are designed for like a tutorial group session. So they'll be available as well. And then the Seeka booklet, my hyperlink isn't working. That's annoying. I'll come back to that. So the Seeka booklet, I'm just going to stop screen sharing while I find that. Seeka booklet is basically, it's called Clinical Experience, Knowledge and Abilities. It's a lovely little acronym that basically is a workbook that students will carry with them, digital, paper, whatever they prefer, that they will bring with them into their clinical practice, and they can talk about various topics with their clinical supervisors. I will just share again. So here's our lovely booklet. And each module has a variety, a whole bunch of topics. I think module 1 is actually quite chunky, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages long.
Can you scroll less because it's very difficult to see?
Oh yeah, I know. I'm just scrolling intentionally fast. So for example, there are things that we talk about that will be useful for you to discuss when you're working clinically with a student. It helps direct their learning. It helps prevent running out of small talk when you're with somebody in theatre. But essentially it gives this structured learning for our students. We will ask once we think that, the students are carrying these books for the 2 years, so they don't need to be getting everything signed off very early on. I recommend better to wait until they are confident and competent with these things before you sign them. And then it's an informal sign off where we ask for the supervisor name, signature and a date. And it's evidence that the students have had time in clinical practice to discuss each of these topics, to practice each of these skills, to perform each of these different things. So there's a whole bunch, and this is for the students to work through over the 2 years. So it helps guide their learning, and it helps the clinical supervisors know what to talk about when they're with students in theatre. As for the tutorials, we've been updating our tutorial list this past week, which I will show you module 1 now.
So we told, or maybe I mentioned it earlier, that we will give you guidance on the tutorials. But the idea is that the tutorials are basically delivered by each trust. So these are 9 weeks. Every week has 1 tutorial. That means it equal to 8, sorry, because 1 week is assessment week. So it's 8 tutorials per module. We are very happy to provide 1 of those online, so it leaves 7 to you. And then we're very happy if you pair up with another trust or a few more trusts in your area, and you can join, you can just share the workload, and then maybe just each trust has only to deliver 2 or 3 tutorials. But you will talk about this later, isn't it, Kaina?
So for example, module 1, week 1, we know is going to be an induction and orientation week. In week 2, UCL will be leading a discussion on this with the students on the scope of practice. Oh, there's a typo. There we go. On the scope of practice of AAs, how they work within theatre, areas about consent, for example, controlled drugs. It's a discussion with the students to sort of get them to understand their roles, their limitations, and their responsibilities. And then week 3 delves into the clinical setting. So week 3 will be delivered in hospital. So this will be something locally delivered. We expect it to take an afternoon, a couple of hours, depending on how many students you have. And for example, we'll be talking about, again, introductions to things like good communication, team brief, safety, monitoring standards. It's very much, there'll be a bit of leveling of playing fields for your students. Some of you will have healthcare professionals who know everything there is to know about the hospital environment. Some of you may have science graduates who've never been in a hospital building in their life. So use this week to sort of gauge the comfort zone of your students, to know whether or not some people need more of a clinical introduction, or whether some people need a bit more help directing to us for academic guidance. For example, how do they do research in journals, things like that. Science grads might be more than familiar with the academic side, but less so clinically, and vice versa. We will share these tutorial guides with you all. So these will all be coming at you imminently. I can share you module 1 straight away, and the rest of them we're just tweaking. I just want to make sure they're all, I'm a pedant when it comes to formatting, and for example, this bothers me that it's misaligned. So I'm going to be perfecting this by this week. So module 1 very much covers it's an introduction to clinical professional practice. So we are in module 1, we are introducing the students to safe professional working behaviours. We know they want to get off the ground running, and you will have your students getting off the ground running as well. So we're introducing them initially to pre-assessment techniques, area assessments. So you can take them with you on week 1 and start getting the students seeing patients. But we want them to be able to do it safely. So that's all about module 1. The assessment side of it will be very familiar to a lot of you. We're using the same workplace-based assessments that the Royal College has designed for the junior doctors. We've just tweaked them ever so slightly for AAs, and this is actually getting updated as well. We've been simplifying, you'll be pleased to hear. Since the new national curriculum was announced in September, They have a list of essential skills which we are amalgamating in with ours. There was only a couple of things we had to change to make our course fit the national curriculum. So it's not taken us a lot of shifting to make that fit. So we are in line with the national curriculum, which will be coming into play in 2024, we're hoping, but we're just getting ahead of the curve. So just jumping back, this is basically showing you a list of which skills, which competencies the students can use to complete the workplace-based assessments. And here's an example which you'll all be familiar with. It's taken with very little liberties from the Royal College of Anaesthetists with their approval to use the same form of paperwork that you use for junior doctors, because it is no point in reinventing the wheel. We're wanting to examine the same behaviours as we do with AAs, student AAs, as we do with junior doctors. Summatively, the students will be getting assessed by UCL under a variety of methods. There's written exams, a mix of MCQs, single best answers, short answer questions. They do oral presentations once in their 2 years. They do a couple of different essays. I think they do 1, 2, 3 essays and some longer coursework. The mixture of workplace-based assessments will form part of their summative assessment for a couple of modules. So that's where we rely very much on the trusts, the ESs, to complete the paperwork that we provide you and feed that back to us so that we can use that to help the students get assessed. At the end of year 1, again, it's very similar to the ARCP element for the students. We do an OSCE at the end of module 8, and then the students do their systematic review. All of this culminates in the students all going well, graduating with an MSc. After they are qualified from a university perspective, they need to sit the national exam, which is the AA registration assessment, which again should be ready as of next year. So all students starting in March will be finishing once this assessment is already live. So they will then need to sit the AARA, which is a combination of work between the GMC and the Royal College, which is a professional registration assessment. They sit that and pass that before they're able to work professionally. So the curriculum itself, which is still in draft form, and the AARA, they are both they've both been getting worked on in collaboration with us at UCL, the University of Birmingham as well. So the providers that have been teaching and training AAs have been involved in both of these bits of work. So that is great, and it's good to know that we know exactly what's going to be looked for, so we know that we are teaching the students appropriately.
So the AARA is really crucial, because without that they won't get any license to practice in the UK, and it will be half a knowledge test. We don't know exactly how this will look like, but the other half will be workplace-based assessments, and I expect that they will use the workplace-based assessment from the 2 years of training with you guys. So whatever the outcome of your workplace-based assessment will decide on their license to practice, if that makes sense. So it is quite important that you keep good record on those, especially looking at their license later.
Absolutely. So yep, after the end of the programme, the university will be expected to speak to the GMC and feedback if we recommend the students for accreditation. If we have any concerns of the students, the GMC will begin their process, and that is where the UCL hands over responsibility to the GMC. After that, they are free to apply for any qualified posts. So that's it from a university perspective. I'm going to hand over to Dan to chat a bit about his experience working with us.
You can do it from there.
You can do it from there if you can hear.
Okay. So can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, great, thanks. So just wanted to talk just a few slides about my experience, both kind of working with qualified anaesthesia associates and also in terms of being involved in the course so far, just to give you guys an idea, especially those of you who haven't worked with AAs or have never trained AAs before, a little bit of insight into what the experience has been like. So if you could move on to the next slide for the time. So as we've already said, we had 6 students who were recruited to UCLH via a competitive selection process, which involved an application form and an interview. I know that you've all been doing similar processes to select your own students. We've been involved in some of those. They've been a real mixture of backgrounds so far, and that's really influenced the way that they've progressed through the course. So we find that the people who come from a recent science graduate background often hit the ground running with the academic work, but are maybe a bit slower with the clinical work, whereas the people who've come from for example, an ODP background are already very familiar with a lot of the day-to-day clinical work, but maybe haven't done the academic work for a bit longer, so maybe need a bit more support with that. But actually quite quickly they even out. And it's been quite nice to see how the students we've had so far have kind of supported each other and used their own kind of knowledge and skills to help the other students to kind of develop. So as we've said, each student will have an educational supervisor, and at UCH we've done that from the faculty of people who've been involved with developing the course so far. And they each get a weekly timetable, which includes some clinical time, a day sets up tutorials, and some private study time. You can click on from that, thanks. So just a little bit about what I've been involved with. Okay. So part of it's been the lecture writing, so this has been a huge amount of work. We've written a lot of lectures now that are all going to be available through Moodle, and they cover a range of material from introductory topics like this one here on the history of anaesthesia, through to clinical topics, through to physiology, anatomy, biochemistry, pharmacology, physics, equipment. So there's a lot there. And the learning material is largely geared towards being a similar standard to what you might expect for an anaesthetic trainee sitting with primary FRCA. And obviously the curriculum doesn't encompass the whole of the primary FRCA, and we don't expect them to do intensive care, we don't expect them to do obstetrics, we don't expect them to do pediatrics, for example, but of the areas that we're covering, and expect it to be a broadly similar standard to the primary FRCA. I think the thing I've enjoyed the most really has been the tutorials. So the tutorials have been a real mixture of practical hands-on stuff, group discussions, simulation, part task training, and we're trying to kind of keep it varied and interesting and hands-on as much as you can. So this is an example of an anatomy tutorial that I did with Kaina, where we did some lung anatomy, some heart anatomy, using sheep organs. Actually, it was really well received by the students. So we'll be providing you with some tutorial plans, and as we've said, we hope that you'll be able to kind of collaborate with other trusts who are close by to you, so you don't have to deliver all of the tutorials yourselves, and we'll be helping with some of the tutorials as well. In terms of the workplace-based assessments, that for those of you who are used to training trainee anaesthetists and doctor anaesthetists, these are largely similar to what you're used to. So the DOPS, the KEXs, the CBDs, the ALMATs, you should all be very familiar with, and it's really, again, using them in the same way as you would with an anaesthetic trainee in theatre. And I think it's always quite good if they can come away from a list having done something towards their portfolio, that means that you've kind of got some learning out of that list. And then the educational supervisor meeting. So this is just an example of an ES supervisor meeting form. So when we sit down with students at the end of each module, we work through in a kind of structured way, looking at their logbook, their workplace-based assessments, their feedback from colleagues, their feedback from patients. And then some of the modules have other things in them, like, for example, we might do a problem-based learning exercise with them in the ES meeting. Now, in some of the modules, that contributes towards their end of module mark, and in some modules, that's purely formative, but you'll get some guidance on that as the modules progress through. And so I just wanted to kind of show you what I've learned so far. So I've been involved with the course from starting the course in terms of when it first got off the ground, but I've worked with qualified AAs for years, really, as right back to being an anaesthetic trainee. And I think it's given me a really good insight into the role and the kind of value that AAs can add to a department. So I think it's important to remember with the students that they are a heterogeneous group. They come in with varying knowledge and skills, and that influences the way that you need to support them through the course. And you can't assume that they're the same as a CT1 novice trainee. They haven't necessarily got the same background knowledge or background training. And as Arndt mentioned, there's a difference in the terminology because they are different. So they are students rather than trainees. They're supernumerary. They shouldn't be left alone. So it's not like a CT1 novice who has their IAC and is then allowed to be left alone in theatre. These people do need to be supervised for the whole of the course. Course is difficult. There's a very steep learning curve. As we mentioned, that learning curve is different for each student depending on their background. But they are, it's hard work for them, and it's worth bearing that in mind when you're supporting them. And it's been hard work for us as well. So there will be some work that you guys need to put in terms of delivering the teaching, delivering the pastoral support. But actually, it's been really good fun as well, particularly the face-to-face, hands-on time, either in the tutorials or in theatre with them. And I hope you guys enjoy it as much as we've done so far. Francis is going to talk to you a bit more about the role of qualified AAs. Just from my perspective, I think there's sometimes a worry that having AAs or student AAs in your department can detract from training your medical trainees. Now, I don't think that's something to worry about. I think there's plenty of lists to go around in most hospitals. There's a lot of underutilized training time, usually, where you might have a consultant on their own for the whole day with nobody with them. And actually, by having some AA students in your department, that allows you to utilize some of those otherwise missed training times. I don't think the trainees need to be worried about that. So we've made it very clear that with our own students, that they shouldn't be on the same list as a trainee in this, particularly a junior trainee in this test, so they're not kind of conflicted in terms of their teaching time. But actually, some of our more senior trainees can really help with training the AA students. And actually, when it comes to having qualified AAs in your department, they can actually really help in training the student medical anaesthetists. So, for example, so I know Kaina in her previous trust spent a lot of time doing auxiliary blocks. I hardly ever do an auxiliary block, so she's a much better person to teach a trainee to do that than I am. And certainly when I was training, I learned, for example, to put in PICC lines by being taught by AAs. So there's a really good kind of cross-pollination there that I hope you'll benefit from. So I'm going to hand over to Francis now to talk a bit about the kind of qualified AA role.
May I quickly add something? I think that's very important what Dan said. We did a survey a few years ago and asked people how they feel about having AAs in the department. And one group which was really reluctant were the junior trainees, because they thought that their training opportunities will be taken away. And that's why we are rostering AA trainees through our college tutors. And the college tutors really make sure that the anesthetic physician trainees get all their teaching opportunities first, and then the AA trainees are allocated to the lists which are left over because they're good enough for them to learn, if that makes sense. And now we have a very good working relationship and no one really is left out. They all get their really good training opportunities. That's how we solve that with UCLH.
Yeah, student AAs don't require specialist training lists such as thoracics lists, obstetrics. So there's no real conflict there.
Yeah.
Student AAs are training through sort of your general anaesthetic lists and your spinal anaesthetic lists. So there really shouldn't be a conflict there.
Happy? Hello. Okay. So just a little overview as how qualified AAs can work. The good thing about AAs is they're a very flexible workforce. So really, a department can have us working in a way that, you know, whatever works for them. I trained to become an AA in Salford and worked there for many years before moving to UCLH. So I've worked in a couple of different places. So just to start at the top, AAs can be really helpful on busy emergency and trauma lists. Obviously, these lists can be quite tricky, so AAs can help with turnover. They can also help if they're skilled in regional anaesthesia and doing blocks and things like that, fascia blocks. They can nip out to see patients, etc., etc. So that was one way that we were used very successfully in Manchester. Here at UCLH, we do a lot of sedation provision, and we provide a sedation service for our interventional radiology department, and it's an AA-led service, and that works really well. As I just mentioned, lots of regional anaesthesia, so AAs can obviously become proficient to deliver spinal anaesthesia and nerve blocks. Another example, up in Manchester, they do 2-to-1 hand trauma lists, so 2 AAs doing upper limb blocks supervised by 1 consultant. Spinal anaesthesia is obviously a skill that we have. Plans for the future. I think there's quite a lot of discussion at the minute about use of AAs on the labour ward, working with a consultant anaesthetist or a trainee, and the potential for us to train and safely deliver epidural anaesthesia. We're not quite there yet, but that's something that I think AAs could be quite useful for in the future. Line services, we did have an AA-led line service here at UCLH. It's not quite the case anymore, but AAs obviously can. We did a line service in COVID actually, so COVID intensive care AAs were putting in lots of central lines and arterial lines, and the intensive care unit found that very helpful. Also PICC lines. We don't do any eye stuff here at UCLH, but up in Liverpool and in Birmingham using
that's going to annoy me.
Subtenon blocks, etc. Lots of AAs run block services for eye surgery. And I know the guys in Liverpool run a very successful block service there. 1-to-1, so 1 AA, 1 consultant anaesthetist, you know, complex major surgery kind of things where you often need two pairs of hands. If you've got a tricky patient that needs epidural, art line, central line, you know, the full English, it's often good to have 2 people there, 1 person doing the procedure, 1 person keeping the eye on the patient. And then 2-to-1 working, I kind of discussed this with the regional stuff, but here at UCLH, we have a cancer centre with 2 adjacent theatres. So, for example, we'll do 2-to-1 with our prostate biopsy list and our HIFU list. So it's 1 sedation list and 1 GA list running side by side, and a consultant anaesthetist supervising the 2, and that works really, really well. Kind of quickly sped through that. Can you think of any others?
Yes, I want to add something. when we designed the curriculum, we strictly followed the national curriculum and also the planned regulation. That means we are not training anyone in obstetrics, and we would be happy if you would also follow that, because that's not regulated at the moment. So any AA working in the obstetrics or in pediatrics or in major trauma or in any of those subspecialties of anesthetics are not regulated and currently not legally covered. So this will happen later, and there are discussions to offer some training modules later on to enable AAs to work in those more specialized fields, but that's not currently part of our training.
Yeah, you'll often hear to some of these things being referred to as advanced practice or advanced skills. Those are for qualified AAs who then would undergo local governance training. For example, when I learned to do my subtenon blocks, that was done through a locally set policy with locally determined training and signed off in-house. So these are sort of advanced practice roles that you want to think about when you have a qualified AA who's got a bit of time under their belt and you want to progress into a niche role that might fit to your department. Okay there. I wanted to address, there was a comment came up in the chat where somebody had asked about the AARA exam not coming into play for our March students. Thank you very much for mentioning that. I have snuck off to the side and texted Nigel Penfold, who's the sort of AA national lead for through HEE, because my understanding was that it was affecting our students, but it's not. You're quite right. You learn something new every day. So Nigel thinks that will be coming to play, that will affect September cohort of students. So the national exam doesn't look like it'll be ready for the first cohort of students. But that just means it's all the more important that we get the students properly trained and assessed in-house and by us at UCL, so that we can ensure that we are getting the best standard of qualified AAs coming out before the national exam. So it'll be more of an onus on us and on you to make sure that our training is superb. Happy there?
Yeah.
Wonderful. A couple of that's the end of it actually. There was a couple of comments. So Ahmed was asking about obstetrics, pediatrics, and ICU. Anything else? So essentially, yeah, obs and peds is the two areas that student AAs won't be getting involved in, and that even qualified AAs won't be. Thank you. Won't be getting involved in without locally sort of set needs. ICU is the remit of the ACCPs really. So there may be some instances where individual trusts currently have AAs doing a bit of work in ICU. Can you think of any, Francis, any that we know? I don't think there are any AAs that do any work in ICU. No, that's the ACCP. Yeah, during COVID.
Everyone works on intensive care.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So that's not part of our standard scope.
Can I also add something? Ahmed, you asked about obstetrics, peds, and ICU. We find it quite challenging to train someone who has never set foot in a theater to become a proficient provider of anesthetics within only 2 years, because we are used to anesthetic trainees who have 6 years of med school, 2-3 years of foundation training, and then they go into core training, and they have like 8 or 10 years of training already in that field. So you have to see that they come more. Not everyone of our trainees is an ODP or a nurse and has some background. So they start from zero, and we have to train them up in 2 years. That's why we really concentrate on the core skills, which is general anesthesia, spinal, sedation. And that's enough for 2 years. If you would train them in all these subspecialties, that would completely overload them, and they wouldn't be good enough to deliver safe services. So maybe just try really to concentrate on the basics, and you will see 2 years really just enough to train that. All the other things, all the subspecialties, all the super things we can do, they come later. They can be trained while they're working.
And really the academic content is designed to support that. So it's a kind of primary FRCA equivalent academic content to support delivery of a safe general anaesthetic, safe sedation, and safe neuraxial blocks. That's really the core kind of academic content of the course.
So we now have a lot of time for you to ask questions. Would be nice if you just unmute yourself and just ask, or if you want, you can use the chat
Raise
Your hand up.
or raise your hand, whatever. We are here for you, and we want this to be, you know, if you have any questions, just please ask us.
Lynn,
jump in.
I know I've been inundating you with lots of questions. I'm really excited about this. We have limited.
You need to put your sound on.
Can you hear me now?
Sorry.
Sorry, Lynn, if you wouldn't mind just repeating that, just turn my speakers up.
Is that any better?
Perfect.
Sorry, I think it's a microphone. So we have limited specialities here. We've got 4 trainees starting. So we've got orthopedics and some general surgery, and we've also got cardiothoracics, but they have trainee anaesthetists. So we were going to send our students to another trust to get a wider range, and Claire McIntyre from that trust's on the meeting today. Will they also have access? They've not signed up the students, but they will have the students for a period of time. So will they still have access to the resources that we will?
Yes, so again, I can only apologise, another one of the delays. I have a meeting at the end of this meeting with our legal team to finalise the contract, the learning agreement sort of contract that we have. So we will also have your colleague to sign up to that. Basically, each trust will sign a contract with UCL as well that says, essentially, we promise to deliver everything from our end, you promise to deliver everything from your end. And then, yeah, we can share all of the learning resources with whichever trust is going to be involved with the students.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, and we'll be able to get, so the other thing as well is with UCL, we sign up clinical supervisors, educational supervisors with sort of UCL visitor access. So you'll be provided with a UCL email address, which will enable you to get access to like the Moodle, the platforms that students use. You'll have slightly different access as a tutor or as an ES than the students would, but it means you still get to see what they see, which is essential.
There's a question about the workplace assessments, if they're done on paper or electronically. So currently they're still paper-based, but we are trying to get them onto the learning platform electronically.
Our students use them on their iPad. They fill them in on the screen using like a PDF or like Adobe Fill and Sign. Most computers have Adobe Fill and Sign easily, so you can complete them digitally. It's just we don't have access to the lifelong learning platform at the Royal College for students. They have just this past, I think a couple of months ago, they've agreed to give AAs access to the lifelong learning platform. And they're still working on designing that platform to be suitable for students. So there isn't this lovely online repository for filling in forms. But it's one thing we are working on. So there's scope in the future. We do use some digital forms. For our first cohort of students, we've been using Google Forms to collect feedback on the students. UCL has a partnership with MS Teams. So we are going to be moving that onto Microsoft Forms. So there will be feedback forms linked through Teams. So some of it will be all digital, and some of it we are still playing a bit of catch up with technology. You see how well we've done this morning.
and I think
Anna has a question.
I was just going to come in on that. The other thing with that is at the end of each module, the students upload their workplace-based assessments for that module onto Moodle, So there's a portfolio section on Moodle, so
Yeah.
they'll upload everything into there for you to review during their ES meeting.
Yeah.
So that's where they submit their essays. That's where they upload their forms. That's where they upload their feedback, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All ultimately ends up on Moodle.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the final result is digital. Whether the students are tech savvy, that they carry an iPad with them in theatre, or they have a bit old school and like to print off a form,
And scan it. And
yeah, they can do either. But we are working to make it more digital as we go. But that's still a bit of a work in progress.
Anna first, I think.
Yeah, Anna, got your hand up.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm the local lead at GSTT. Can you hear me all right? I've got a couple of practical questions. I think you touched at the beginning on the first week that Monday is for the trust induction, Tuesday for the UCL induction. Does it mean that Wednesday we can do our departmental induction and Thursday they are in theatres? Or is there anything else planned for that week?
Nope. So generally speaking, a week would run roughly 2 or 3 days clinical. Ours do sometimes 2.5 days because the tutorial is usually for our guys on a Wednesday afternoon. But it's about 20 hours a week clinical. So for the very first week, whenever you have your trust induction, that's absolutely fine. You can bring them in clinical for 2 or 3 days that week, whatever you'd like to do. The students have a requirement to do about 150 clinical hours per module. That's where we found this sort of 2.5, 3 days a week is usually adequate for that. And some of our students are very lucky that they end up getting 150 learning hours by the sort of, for example, week 7. So we sometimes get requests to have a day or 2 less in week 8 to allow them to prepare for the assessments in week 9. That's also perfectly allowed, so long as they are up on their hours. Our college tutors sometimes roster them for a day less leading up to exams, things like that.
So in terms of their working hours, do they basically in UCL come for 3 days a week to do a list? That's okay, fine. And you said there are 8 modules in total. Am I correct that each module is 3 months?
They're
Roughly
10 weeks. So there's 8 weeks
10 weeks.
of learning, 1 week of assessment, and then a week break, and then rinse and repeat.
Okay, so we'll have those 2 weeks without any tutorials.
Yeah.
In between. Okay, great, thank you. And I think that's it for now. Thanks.
Lovely. In week 9, so when the students have their end of module meeting will occur in week 9. That will require time with their ES. They also have a written exam, which is done online, but requires to be invigilated. So they'll be sat with somebody, a tutor or an ES, with them in a room with a laptop, basically. And it's all linked through Moodle. It's all done on the online platform, but it just is an invigilated exam, so it's secure.
Yeah, I said on the chat, Kaina, there is 2 questions. When do they get Moodle access, and can we send them the tutorial plans soon?
Yes, I'm just going to scroll back because I noticed we missed one earlier as well. Claire Cook, I think that's actually Irfan, that's your login because I can see your name. No,
together.
UCL doesn't provide the iPads. Students have to provide their own equipment.
Answer that. Yeah. Claire, there's a
I think
there's
we've
a
got
hand
another
up.
question.
Yeah.
Irfan, your turn.
Yes, it's not Claire Cook, it's Irfan. Thanks, guys. So I think you've already answered it in the chat. So I've got a few questions. So the tutorial that UCL are going to deliver per module, is it one per module you're going to deliver for the students?
Yes.
And you let us know in due course which one that is.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fine. And so the assessment's done online. How much assessment does the education supervisor have to do? Is it so you have those sheets where people get signed off? Is it the education supervisor looking at their logbook and saying yes, you've met your learning requirements, you've been in theatre enough, and that's it, or is there a more detailed assessment that they should be doing?
No, so we provide the
Is it check?
form for the educational supervisors to fill in
Yeah.
that Dan showed you. I know it was a little bit hard to see on
Yeah,
the
yeah,
screen.
but
So
you've
we'll
got
send
just
we'll
a-
send you all of that.
Yeah.
But essentially, we find it takes, depending on how much time it takes you to chat with your student, it takes me an hour to 2 hours sat down with a student at the end of each module to go through the logbook, to go through a sort of feedback forms that the students have, whether those are anonymous feedback forms from the clinical supervisors or patient feedback forms. We get the students to do a bit of reflective writing each module as well, so they have a little reflective piece. And I found those to be really insightful, actually. The change that you see from module 1 to our guys now, their sort of reflective pieces are really showing growth with students. There's a few bits of formative assessments that happen in there as well, which is more about offering guidance and feedback to the students. So that's really key to come from the ES. But it's all in this one form that we need from you guys, and then that gets uploaded to us at UCL. And at the end of year 1, we use them to form part of that ARCP where we're looking at their full progress.
Can you quickly tell them when we're going to send out the tutorial plans and when they get the Moodle access?
Yes, module 1 tutorial plans I can send out at the end of this meeting, basically. There's a tiny bit of formatting I want to fix, but I'll send them out. And then the rest of the tutorial plans, I'm hoping to get to you within the next 2 or 3 weeks. Will be the full 2 years worth of tutorial plans, but module 1 will send out straight away. That's good to go. I'm just being fussy and fixing the rest of them. Moodle access, because they are changing the layout on Moodle, they're changing it all because of accessibility issues. Some of our students use, like some of UCL wider students use text-to-speech readers. So UCL is outlawing the particular formats, that grid format that you see on Moodle. So we've requested a new Moodle page for March 2023 students, which our IT department is duplicating. I'll chase them up. As soon as they've got it, I'll sign everybody up to it.
Do the students need to be enrolled before they can get access?
So the students, I can provide guest access if there's any students with issues with late enrolment, because I know things have been a little bit by the wire for some trusts. So I think all of our students have started the enrolment process now. I've had a few emails from students saying things like, I couldn't upload a transcript. Oh my God, please help. So I know people have started. And our administrator is keeping an eye on all of those applications. So if there's any major delays, we can speak to the students and we can offer them guest access in the interim. So I'll be able to show everybody and get everybody using Moodle on day 1. Getting the clinical supervisors, the local clinical leads, getting access to you guys. There is a simple form to fill in, which I will get sent out. That comes from our teaching department at UCL, and that gets you an email address, which is relatively quick.
There are
Yep.
2 hands, but before we go
Yep.
to the hands, I quickly like to go back to the chat because there is a really important question about
One thing I'll finish up before you move on.
what Francis is just working on.
With regards to access, I did send out an email to the contacts that I have. I've not heard back from everybody yet. I need from each trust, I need to know a named person who will be the local clinical lead, a deputy, the names of your ESs, because all of these people need set up with this UCL profiles. So do let me know who's going to be undertaking which role and a contact email address for everybody there.
So we're coming back to your hands, Zoe and Claire, but about the local lead.
I'm on it.
Yes, but I just wanted to say something while Francis is working on that. So if you look at the map, can you all see that? These are all the trusts who currently work with us and have students enrolled. You see they are quite far distances between some of the trusts, and some of the trusts are quite near. So if you, I'm just showing you, so this is the Golden Jubilee Glasgow, and then we have the York and Scarborough hospitals, the Northern Carolines, Norfolk and Norwich, Peterborough, East and North Hertfordshire, East Suffolk, North Suffolk, East Suffolk and North Essex, Berkshire, and then in London we have the Royal Free, the UCLH, and GSTT. So our idea initially was to connect you all and make sure that you can share some workload of the tutorials. But we feel like it's maybe nicer to leave that to yourself to connect with a trust. We are very open to that idea. So if you want to share, the workload of tutorials, for example, if you have a trust nearby and you want to do this face-to-face, you can invite the students of the other trusts. Or if you want to do some of your tutorials online, it's up to you. We are very happy for any solution you come up with, if that's okay for you. That's basically our idea. So we are very happy, especially, for example, the London Trust. That would make sense. They're very nearby and they're easy accessible. So if you join, together and you just share the tutorial workload amongst each other, that's totally fine. So there is no need for every trust to do all the tutorials or all the teaching themselves. So we are happy even for you if you want to send students around. That's all possible. And this is Matt is showing you who are your neighbors, where are your friends. So we believe we might not need to be the ones organizing these networks. If you do want to have a network with another trust, just let us know, then we can it's easier for us to communicate those things.
Yeah, we can absolutely facilitate that.
The other thing that might be relevant to that is that in the same way that London has, your region might be appointing someone to take on a TPD role for your AA students, and they may be able to help you with your kind of local coordination between trusts.
Francis, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, I'm just replying to a different message. What do you want me to say?
About the local lead network.
Yeah, so I put information in the chat. Each region, HE appointed an anaesthesia associate ambassador in each region. So I put the details of the recently appointed East of England ambassador. And so I've put his email address in there, and I suggest you contact him with regards to a local network. We've set up something similar in London. And as Dan just said, we've also just appointed him as the training program lead, and he's going to oversee training in London. And I think that would be a useful thing for people to have in different regions, but it's really up to your individual ambassador to try and organise and liaise with their HE link with regards to funding, etc. But that is what we're doing in London.
Before we continue with the chat, can we maybe go to Zoe?
Yes, you've been waiting patiently.
Yes, thanks for waiting.
Hi, so it's just a quick question. Is it just then one module at a time that we learn, that we go through, and then that's assessed, and then you move on to the next one? So just a quick question in terms of with the trust, they've kind of just said we take annual leave as we take it. But if there is a week that you have off in the summer, or you're going to probably have leave at some point during the programme, what happens then with like the time? Or because obviously, so I'm like thinking I've got a few weddings in the summer, I'm going away at the end of the year, and if it's falling on assessment weeks and stuff, it's like how far in advance do we know those assessment weeks to like plan around them?
Zoe, are you one of the students?
Yeah.
Right. So this is we've got a separate induction for you on a different date. So this is our sort of clinical lead and trust leads chat.
Okay.
So apologies, you've been invited to this one incorrectly. I'll answer this. So the course for this program is set, the weeks are set. It doesn't follow standard term times. So you have to take your annual leave within these weeks allocated by UCL. If you miss, for example, a tutorial because you're on holiday for a wedding, unfortunately, you've just missed that tutorial. If your trust is willing to catch you up on that, that's fine. That's theirs. You cannot miss assessments. That's the only thing. These are set. So those dates are completely fixed.
Okay. When do you find out those weeks?
We'll be sending a calendar out to everybody ASAP, really.
Okay.
I know we have had a few delays with getting the contact details from trusts. So most of our students have only started enrolling. Sorry, that sounds like I'm blaming you guys. I'm not. There's been a lot happening on both sides. There's been students started enrolling last week, which usually takes 8 weeks. So we're trying to push through the enrollment process so that everybody's signed up and ready to go first. But yeah, imminently is the short answer for the calendar.
And then was the student one the one that was on the Saturday in February?
No, it's on the 7th of March.
That was an accidental invite. There was never meant to be
Okay.
anything on a Saturday in February.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay, cool. So it's just the 7th of March. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Bye, Zoe. See you then. Should we continue with the chat? Because there's some more questions here. Do we have a formalized list of responsibilities for student AA education supervisors? I think that's a fabulous idea. As far as I know, we don't have that yet, but I think we should produce such a list because I agree with you that it is different than the classical ES work we do for physician trainees. I think we're going to do that and share with you, shall we? Yeah. Okay.
We can do that.
We're going to send you something, but it's in a nutshell, it's just basically you are the mentor and the supervisor and you help them transition from wherever they come to being in AA.
Yeah.
It's actually a really nice job. And I think all of us, we have enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And you're really much more close to your trainee or student than you are with the anesthetic trainees, and you get to know them very well. And that's basically what it is.
Yeah. In practice, for me, it is a meeting every 10 weeks with my student to go through this paperwork, but also she'll drop me emails every now and then. It's good to be rostered to be clinical supervisor for your own student, fairly regularly so that you see their practice, that sort of thing. So that's what we're looking for in practice with an ES.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit of a mix between the kind of classic ES role in terms of kind of educational supervision and mentorship. Really, it's a bit of a mix of those two responsibilities. So part of it is the kind of pure kind of academic side of it and the assessment side of it, and then part of it is just more of the kind of mentorship and pastoral support that goes with that. Yeah, I mean, it's not. I don't think any of us have found it too onerous in terms of time or paperwork. I mean, the main paperwork is the end of module paperwork, and then the rest of the time is just kind of catching up with them, checking in with them, making sure everything's okay, answering any questions they might have, supporting them if there's any difficulty with anything, and making sure they're getting an exposure to a wide variety of cases, that kind of thing. It's not been too onerous.
There's another question about the interview process, and have you seen that? Our applicant who have been selected through an interview process now are in the process of applying to UCL, and they need to give notice at the current jobs.
Yeah.
What's the time frame?
Yeah, so the names that we were given from the students, from the trusts, they're being enrolled now. So that, I mean, I highly doubt it, unless anybody's transcripts are false or they don't submit their application or don't submit their references, there's no reason why their enrollment won't go ahead. So if they've passed your HR processes and they've been offered a position at your trust, and they meet the requirements, then the enrollment at UCL is a technicality. So as long as you guys are assured that your healthcare professionals have the work experience and your science grads, you've seen their degree transcripts, then you can safely offer them their contract, and UCL will get the ball rolling with the paperwork.
it's really only an administrative process. We are not going through any, you know.
Yeah, yeah. There's no final hurdles.
No.
As long as their transcripts are legitimate and their work history is legitimate, they're in. And that should have all been done by your shortlisting and interview process. So they're good to go.
Cool.
Yeah, I know. What's that? What's 8 weeks from today? I think we're a couple of weeks in. So we have deliberately, we knew about this morning. We knew there was going to be a couple of late people. So we've deliberately set the first couple of tutorials to be things that can be virtual. The trust induction, I know, is slightly flexible. The UCL induction day for the students is virtual. Week 2 tutorial run by UCL is virtual as well. So people can do this from home. If for any reason there's been a couple of delays with them, you know, we know there might be like a week or two short on their 8-week notice if that's only just happened last week. But all the names that we gave to UCL last week and the students have started enrolling, my understanding is that they're all good to go from an HR point of view. If there's any students that haven't finished their HR processes yet, then that may cause a problem for you guys getting them in the building. If they're behind on their clinical hours, they can catch them up. You may be able to just roster them an extra day a week or something to bring them up to speed. So if they're going to be a week or two behind because they haven't handed in their notice yet, it's flexible. We can work around that. They can do some extra shifts and they can still get access to the Moodle and begin doing their learnings if they haven't finished their previous job yet, if you know what I mean. Does that answer your question? Does that make sense? I kind of would have thought everybody would have handed in their notice by now. I was hoping that was already done from HR, but maybe HR is not as speedy as I thought it was going to be.
There was a question yesterday from the guys at GSTT about annual leave. I phoned you about it.
Yes, I answered that.
Oh,
yes. Just to Zoe.
Sorry, did you?
So just in case anybody else missed that, because the students this time round are being appointed on a band, there was a question about annual leave entitlement. The students actually get, they have the fixed weeks off and the fixed teaching weeks. The assessments are set. If in-house, obviously there are tutorials once every 8 weeks. We expect from a UCL, we do expect 100% attendance at tutorials. Technically, students at UCL can have a 70% attendance, which seems shocking, before they would undergo disciplinary proceedings. So if a student misses 1 or 2 tutorials in a couple of years because they've got, you know, like a wedding, for example, as Zoe mentioned, it's not the end of the world. It's their responsibility to pick up on that learning later. You guys might be lovely and say, we'll offer you that teaching on a different day. That's up to you guys in-house. There may be some recordings that you can do that you can offer to the students later. Again, we can work around the odd couple of glitches there. But yeah, the term times don't follow standard university, you know, summer, Easter weeks. Our students with the calendar have 8 weeks on, an assessment week, and then a week off. And there are additional breaks for Easter and Christmas, but there's no summer break, there's no February break. So that calendar, I will send out to you guys again ASAP. I'm waiting on one final thing. I can send out year 1 immediately. I can send that out. I'm waiting on one tiny thing from UCL for year 2. And then I'll get that sent out, but I'll send out year 1 of that calendar after this meeting. And that at least lets everybody plan. I know it's a bit frustrating that we've not got you these things already.
What's about sickness?
Sickness, normal HR processes for sickness, report to UCL if there's prolonged sickness. There is the opportunity at the end of the course in that sort of final dissertation modules where there is less home-based learning for them to do, that they'll be able to catch up on hours. Personally speaking, I had the experience when I was a student that I broke my leg and I was off for months, and I ended up having to repeat the year. So we do understand that sickness happens, you know, life happens, people get in the way, people get ill, people get pregnant, people get injured. So these are all things that have to be dealt with normal HR processes. But as a university, we will be as flexible as we can. And for clinical hours, I think there's ample opportunity for the students to if they miss 2, 3, 4 weeks for illness, there's ample opportunity for them to still meet the required hours by the end of 2 years. Our guys are well ahead in hours. So I think there's actually quite a generous buffer. Exactly.
Yeah, some even, you know, some have worked so hard that they have finished their hours before the module ends, and then they can even ask for a few days off.
Yep.
So that's quite flexible. Yep. That's why we have this more like we have this hours they have to, the amount of hours they have to achieve, yep. And then they're free to do whatever they want in their time.
Any other questions from anyone?
Your chance.
Yeah, so we currently ask our education supervisors to keep track on the working hours.
No, that's the students.
No, the students take track themselves and then present to the.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's true. They keep track themselves, and the education supervisor signs that off.
Yeah.
So at the start of the course, it's important to emphasise to them you need to keep a logbook. And you need to keep a diary of your clinical hours right from day one.
And you have to help them to show them how the logbook should look like. Some of them use an app, a logbook app, but that doesn't really capture all the data we would like to see. Basically, all our students ended up in just having an Excel spreadsheet where they enter all the data after every day of working to really capture all the necessary details.
Yeah, we know there's loads of logbooks out there that are available. The handbook that the students will be given, and that you guys will be given as well, details exactly what the students need to record for their portfolio. So the hours, the case mix that they're sort of with the logbook. So it's all very detailed. I can just apologise that as detailed as it is, you haven't seen it yet. But I will get all that paperwork out to you guys ASAP.
So there is a question, do we have a logbook template or app we recommend? We really tried to find a good app, but we didn't find one, which is really good. And they're all missing out some data.
Yeah.
I don't really think that we failed to find a good app. Yeah.
We direct the students on Moodle. That resources tab in Moodle has links to 3 or 4 different logbooks. The facility to also do free text within those logbooks is important, because that way the students can really document, for example, I've looked after this case, but I specifically have intubated them, or I specifically have, done an arterial line. So that sort of recording we only found as a free text option, which is why most of our students use an Excel spreadsheet, because then they can do everything on their phone. They can open Excel on their phone or similar, or like Google Sheets, and record it.
I think it's really important for the education supervisor meeting that they can come up with summaries of the logbook.
Yeah.
So we want, for example, with the student I'm supervising, I always look at which cases has he done. And then it turns out that he had done basically only urology cases in one whole module. And then we could easily see, okay, look, we need to have a bit more exposure into other disciplines. And then he went with that information to the college tutor, and then they could assign him to other lists. And now he has much more better distribution of cases. So the only way to spot that for me was by seeing his graphical presentation of the data, and that's very easy to be done in Excel. So that's why I really like that.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more work for the students, but hey, they're students, isn't it?
Yeah. The logbook template, the same ones that Anna said at trainees. In theory, yes, but we find it doesn't have as much detail. The logbooks, I'm setting logbooks that are available on app stores don't have the specific level of detail. And mentioning about sharing the Excel spreadsheet. So we actually have each of our 6 students made their own. So what we can do, we can ask our students for, I know one of them in particular, you all know who I'm talking about, has a wonderful spreadsheet. I'll ask him if we can take his template and share that. That would be nice, actually. That would say, again, save reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, you might want to send that. He talked about it.
Ah.
So we have to ask students if they're happy to share that, or if they want to put it on an app store type of thing.
Somebody's recommending that.
Oh, handy base. Oh, marvelous. I'm going to take a note of that myself.
I think we can add that to the Moodle resource.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Excellent. Thank
Is
you,
it
Lynn.
$7.99 per month, or is it just once? Lynn?
I think it's a one-off payment of $7.99, and it was recommended to me last week by a consultant anaesthetist who's been using it for years. You sort of populate it with what you want to have in your drop-down menus, and then you can almost year on year copy it and start a new logbook per year, and apparently it summarises things for you as well. So I had a look at it, and it is $7.99, a one-off payment, but I don't know much more about it, but it's maybe worth looking into.
Fantastic. Yes, absolutely.
Definitely, yeah, thanks.
We get spoiled here at UCLH, you see, because we have EPIC, the electronic system. As long as you're recorded as being in theatre, it documents everything for you and generates a report. So I haven't filled in a logbook for 3.5 years because it's all done automatically. So spoiled. So I do feel sorry for the students, but yeah, that sounds great. I'll have a look into this handy base. Right.
Cool. Any
Any
other questions?
They're at
Log4AS.
excellent. I'm going to look into both of these suggestions. Yeah. I just want to Memento database. Excellent, lovely ideas. Okay, I'm going to look at all of these and see. Yeah, I'll just again want to apologize for the paperwork delays for you guys. It's just, we appreciate your patience. I know it's frustrating. I know you guys want to get started. And I know it's just being a few weeks away, you need to start planning your rostering. So I will get the calendar for year 1 out to you guys imminently, like by the end of this week, if not by the end of tonight. And the module 1 tutorial plans, we'll get them out again this evening or by the end of Friday. I'm a day off on Friday as well. Everything else will be coming in the next week or 2, I hope.
If you still have any questions, we are always available for you. So we are all, happy to answer questions. And I think the best way to contact us is our email box. I hope you all have. Can you just put it in the chat? So one of us is always monitoring that email box, and we are all answering it. So you will have one of us 4 behind that box. So it's not some administrator or someone who is answering that. It's your direct contact to us. And yeah, we hope that's an easy way for you to contact us at any time.
Yes.
Cool.
Everybody happy? Lovely. Okay, we'll sign off there then. Thank you very much for joining us. And perfect. And if anybody hasn't yet gotten in touch with us to let us know who's going to be a point of contact for their trust, then do drop us an email.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for the positive
Thank
feedback.
you.
Yeah.
Bye now.